Hello. So, two more today, and I just want to get out of the way right away. Dom DeLuise, as I learned last night, is neither Buddy Hackett nor John Candy. Um, I got excited to see this familiar name as a guest star on the Magic School Bus Gets Ready, Set, Dough, and Dom DeLuise plays the baker at the bakery that the Magic School Bus kids take a field trip to, and I knew that Dom DeLuise was, big for many reasons, for many things, but specifically, I knew him as a voice in animated movies, specifically All Dogs Go to Heaven and All Dogs Go to Heaven 2. But I thought that he was also the voice of Scuttle in The Little Mermaid and the Albatross in The Rescuers Down Under, and I guess also The Rescuers, although I think that might have been two different people voicing Scuttle, or voicing the Albatross, whose name I forget. But in fact, no, that is not the case. Those birds are voiced by Buddy Hackett and John Candy, not necessarily respectively. I forget which is which, and I didn't have that information ready for me. But Dom DeLuise, nevertheless, is an exciting guest voice to appear on a Magic School Bus episode. Not necessarily, no, not for me, not as exciting as Carol Channing or even Tyne Daly, but more exciting than, say, Robbie Benson or Ed Begley Jr. So that's where we start. The baking episode, and the plot of this one didn't really stick with me so much as the fact that if you mix baking soda and vinegar together, you get an explosion. And this was before YouTube and before Ellen, when this sort of thing was happening all the time on clips on the internet. It must be very challenging to do something new and never seen before on a children's educational cartoon these days. Maybe one day I'll find out. But the plot, the actual plot, wherein that is learned, and that is really the standout, because they go into baking processes and things mixing together and how salt and sugar look really, really close up. But what sticks with you is the fact that baking soda and vinegar will seethe and bubble and create a gas and blow up a little balloon, as DA does with Ms. Frizzle, and ultimately blast the bus out of a cake. So the plot is basically the kids want to throw the Frizz a birthday party, a surprise birthday party, but they don't have a cake. And DA, meanwhile, is really into chemistry, and she makes a block of cement at the beginning of the episode that reminds them, oh, we don't have a cake, because the block of cement looks like a cake. So the bus is still broken down at the beginning of the episode, which is perhaps the most continuity that I've detected in any of these, because, of course, the bus broke down in the Haunted House episode, and the Magic School Bus became the Magic Sound Museum. To foster the children through their science adventure, and the bus is still broken at the top of this episode, and we open on Ms. Frizzle trying to fix it, and so she has to. She comes in. She says, "Our field trip to the bakery is canceled," and this is after the kids have thought, "Well, we're going to a bakery, so we can get a cake at the bakery during our field trip." But then they're not going to the bakery on a field trip, and even Arnold, Arnold says that's okay. Arnold says don't feel bad about canceling the field trip, because of course Arnold would, but the rest of the kids convince her to still do the field trip, and resulting in Arnold rolling his eyes in opposite directions, which might indicate some kind of health issue with Arnold. And then, perhaps because the animators did that, and then they thought, we've got a few more seconds to fill, let's just have Arnold do it again. He does it twice, and I'm thinking, Arnold is having a seizure or something. It It's funny. Kids would find it funny. I find it concerning. But anyway, they all get on the bus. The bus does fine, drives them to the thing, and then kind of randomly shrinks upon arrival and buzzes into the building. Uh, there's a baby on her father's back, and she sees the bus flying around like a little bug and goes for it. So that was a nice touch. And Dom DeLuise is the voice of the baker. And then the Frizz decides to park the bus in the kitchen, leave the kids, and go next door to the hardware store to look for things. And she is still shrunk. But she apparently, while at the hardware store, has a conversation with the person at the hardware store to find out that he doesn't have the part she needs. And so one wonders what he thought. Or maybe he's familiar with her. But if he were familiar with her, he'd probably have the part she needed. But, so don't think too much about that. And then she goes back later after that. But in the meantime, the kids who convince her to go to the hardware store and leave them there, they start baking the cake. And Arnold accidentally spills vinegar on baking soda, or vice versa, and that's when we first see it start to boil and bubble. Not boil. I don't want to get a science term wrong. Just fizz. But mostly they start looking for all the ingredients, and the bus helps. And I think maybe the bus is faking being sick, as children are wont to do, because the bus wants to help them. Because the bus does all sorts of things without a problem. It turns into a flying bus with egg beater propellers. It drags the milk over with a suction cup. It seems to work fine for the kids. There's maybe one or two hiccups, like when they're actually being baked in the cake, which the lyric in the opening song is, "You might get baked into a pie on the Magic School Bus," which probably rhymes and goes better with the rhythm and whatever. But they're baked into a cake, and that part of the theme song, they are seen to blast out of a cake. So that's always struck me as funny. Just I know when you're writing a song, you gotta play by the rules of writing a song, but it's funny. So I think the bus is faking sick. Although, well, when it fails to blast out of the cake, the Frizz is there, so it might just be playing its part. But it does pretty well, and I didn't write down much in the way of the beats of the episode. It does show that salt close up looks like building blocks, and sugar close up looks like crystals, and they make a big thing of that. Let's see. And meanwhile, the baker suspects moths, and he says a couple of things that are very funny. And the Frizz pops in and out, and DA distracts her with the baking soda vinegar thing. But the baker says that the moths are baking a cake, and because he's on the phone with the exterminator, and the exterminator apparently doesn't believe him, because why would they? And he says, well, perhaps my place just attracts a higher breed of moth. I think that's a funny line. Also, he sings the I forget what it's called. I believe it's from Carmen, the Toreador. He sings that because he's Italian, and because he's a baker, and he's got the big mustache, and this is when he grabs the batter and he takes over baking the cake, because he tastes it and he thinks, oh, I don't remember making that, but it's really good, so I'll take credit. And he sings the something along the lines of, into the pan I pour, oh, no, not on the floor, because he spills a little bit of it on the floor. And so, but he keeps singing the opera song, the aria, and I know the actual lyrics to that aria, but I prefer his version, and because it was my first, I think I'd heard the tune because it's one of the most popular tunes to come out of opera. It's in everything. It's probably in Bugs Bunny. But that was the first time that English lyrics were applied to it in my memory, and so I stick with the not on the floor lyrics. As I mentioned, the Frizz comes back. She's wearing a heat suit while they're in the... She managed to get into the cake just before it went into the oven, or she managed to get into the oven after it was closed. I don't know. she's magic, and she gets into the bus, and she tells Liz that Liz forgot to put on the heat shield on the bus, and Carlos has been teaching the lesson about baking the cake. He's been the one saying the lines that Ms. Frizzle would normally say about, and this is why this happens, and so that's. But Liz is kind of, in charge, um, and then let's see, and then so they do the baking soda vinegar thing to help them escape, and then back in the classroom they show up with the cake that the baker just gave them to them for free because moths made it, etc. And that's the end of the episode. And the post-show call is an in-person thing. A kid comes into the bakery and says, and talks to the baker. So the baker it's another one. It's kind of like Phoebe, where he was in the episode, he was a character, but he's also an actor, but he's also apparently really a baker. And the kid says, I bet you a donut that I can tell you what was wrong with the episode, or what the episode never revealed or taught that it should have. And he thinks that he can guess, and so he keeps upping it, maybe two donuts, 3 donuts. And then ultimately the kid said the episode doesn't say how old Ms. Frizzle is, and walks away with a ton of donuts. And Dom DeLuise has some funny line on the kid's way out. I forget what it was, but that's, it's nice that they do different. It's kind of like the Wishbone thing. It wasn't always the same, here's how we did it. And so with this, it's mostly answering questions that the episode might have brought up just to clarify things for the kids, but they do different things with it, and so it is interesting. So the next episode, Plays Ball, and this is one I think it's cool to watch, but it doesn't really it's not something that I'm particularly interested in, and because I'm not that into sports, and baseball is the framing device of this episode, Plays Ball. So it's another one where the kids, for some reason, are going for some record. In this case, I think it's a home run record that Ralphie is trying to break. And this was before Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa were breaking through even to my awareness of athletes by breaking home run records. But again, it's not particularly important. Ralphie's trying to focus on the game. DA has a book about forces. She's a very science person, this Dorothy Ann. Very, very into reading. According to my research, is her tagline, or her, whatever they call it, her motto, her catchphrase, that's the one. So she brings in a book on forces, pushing and pulling, and friction. And Ralphie doesn't like that she's distracting from the game. And she tries to explain, no, friction and pushing and pulling forces, they are very important to baseball. So you want to be informed about them. But ultimately, he grabs the book and he wants to use it for home plate, although he doesn't tell her this. So he is going to, and that's a very mean thing to do with someone's book. A thing that a kid would do, but still, it didn't bother me as much when I was a kid as it does now. If somebody did something like that with one of my books, there'd be a problem. But before he can hit another home run over this book that actually wouldn't make a good home plate because it's very light and it changes shape. Like if you hit it, if you slide into home base at a certain angle, then it would just open up, and then it becomes bigger, and then that could be construed as cheating. But it's time to go on the field trip, and the bus is on the field, seemingly running the bases. Kids all get on. Ralphie leaves the book in the dirt. That's okay, because of course the book becomes the field trip. And what DA was trying to show Ralphie was that the book has a baseball diamond in it, and that explains things about baseball. And this is mostly what I made notes about on the episode, because they go into the book, the bus turns pages with its wheels, but then they get to the right page, and it is a baseball diamond, but they go down into it. And I know they're very small, but they're not microscopic, and it looks like the book is significantly indented on that page, even though the page doesn't seem to be any thicker than any of the other pages. That always bothered me. I was able to. It's very slippery, and that's the point. It's very and I just assumed, well, it's glossy. It's like a National Geographic page is glossy. It's or a magazine, any magazine. It's slicker than, say, the page this um, from the pad. But it seems like it always struck me as weird that the book seems to have an in-ground pool that doesn't necessarily show up if you turn the page. But whatever. Um, let's see where else. Oh, also as they go in, the illustrators, cartoonists, animators didn't even try to write actual words on the page. Either in the Magic School Bus world, they speak a different language or read a different language, or they just put random letters in. And later in the episode, when they're peeling letters off, that also always struck me as weird that the letters on the page would peel off so neatly. But I guess that might actually be something. My computer's doing this weird thing. I think it's just that it went to screensaver and then I pushed the button, but it's a little confused. It did this when I was recording the Gatsby Chapter 5. I'm looking at a blank screen right now. It didn't seem to affect that video, so I'm assuming it's not going to affect this one. If you know what's going on with my computer, because it came back, I think it's just a delayed reaction or something to the screensaver going off. But if you know what's happening, comment so that I can get a sense of it. Anyway, they go down into and the picture's back. They go down into the in-ground baseball field and they start slipping around. The bus becomes a blimp, reporting on the game. It uses a little claw to place the kids at positions because they can't get there on their own. And then as they throw the ball around and they hit the ball, they start sliding in every direction, and it's chaos, and that's the whole thing. They learn to push and pull in order to control their movements to the extent that they can, but they can't really control it until the bus extends a rope across the page, I guess, and the kids all grab it, and then they can pull on it and use the friction to get to one end or the other of the thing. And this episode has a lot of clashes between DA and Ralphie. And as they are all getting on the bus and leaving, wind blows the book closed, and it's too heavy for the bus to get out. So that's where it comes in. Some of them are going to lift the page, and some of them are going to stack letters in the spine of the book to keep it elevated, which doesn't entirely make sense. But Ralphie and DA are still fighting, and Arnold says points out that there's friction between them, and when there's friction, it's harder for things to get moving, and so they need to get rid of the friction between them if they're going to get the bus moving. It's a metaphor, but it also, kind of gives, I forget what it's one of those second, third level lessons that the episodes sneak into. I forget what was the last one that I pointed out, but friction can also be between people, and it also impedes progress, is essentially what they're saying there. So that's just a nice don't fight kids thing. So let's see. They peel off the letters, they stack them in the spine, they do all that, and then Miss Frizzle sings Out of the Book and Through the Words, which, because it's through the woods, is a particularly clever take on that. I liked it anyway. And then they're playing baseball later, but Ralphie is reading DA's book, and DA hits a home run. And then the post-show bit is about ice skating and sledding and all the ways in which, mostly we walk around, there's friction, and therefore we don't slip. But and that's what the show kind of gave the impression, that there's friction everywhere we go. But really, the person on the phone at the end of the show is just pointing out some places there is not friction, and we take advantage of that. So that's those two episodes. And the next two episodes are Goes to Seed. And that's one that I really like. It doesn't really... I like it for its Honey, I Shrunk the Kids vibe, but not really for anything else. I'll have to find out. I probably know Robbie Benson from something, but I don't recall just what. And then Gets Ants in Its Pants. It's about ants. I don't really remember it. Making a movie about ants, creatures that are okay. So that'll be interesting. But again, it's not. So neither of these is particularly ingrained in my mind, except Goes to Seed. But again, not for the episode itself, just because it reminds me of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, which is a movie I really love. So, seatbelts, everyone.